It's a new year and a new era of tabletop roleplay games, and there is a bunch of new TTRPGs out there, but this video is here to talk about why you should be keeping an eye on DC20. So what is DC20? Should you be interested in it or not? What's the rules of it about? How does the game work? Well, who better to talk to, because I'm the Dungeon Coach, creator of DC20, and we're going to break down the quick overview of what this game is. DC20 is a heroic fantasy game that focuses on efficient and intuitive rules that let you play together as a team. It allows you to create unique and customizable characters with its flexible class and ancestry system. Then it all fits together to create one epic game where theatrical storytelling meets tactical combat. And if you have played D&D like most all of us have, this will still feel fresh but familiar. In fact, the main TTRPG that I ever played was 5th edition for years. I have a whole history of homebrewing 5th edition, and that's actually where DC20 was born from. You know, all the times where we've played Dungeons and Dragons and you hit that spot of the game, it's just a little clunky, or this certain combo's a little broken, or the way that this works just could hit better. It could be more exciting. You can actually play together instead of going around the table and have individuals acting one after another, never truly interacting with each other, having people combine moves together, having dynamic choices of what to do on the turn with your allies or not. I'll get into some of those rule differences here in a second, but that was the intent, is to fix some of the clunkiness of D&D. Instead of having things like attribute scores that then yield modifiers and they're different and all that kind of stuff, they should just be streamlined and updated to fit the modern TTRPG space. A good reference to this is Pathfinder, how in 3.5 they split off and did their own thing, and Pathfinder was kind of the same, or very similar at least, to 3.5, and then now they made their 2nd edition and made some big changes. Now the direction that Pathfinder went down is a lot more crunchy than the more intuitive and efficient rules that I'm trying to go for. But you'll also see a lot of inspiration from some of the moves that Pathfinder did choose to make. So I have seen people describe this as a perfect balance between Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder 2nd edition. And honestly, when creating this game, I had the intent of being more similar to 5th edition than I've ended up being. But with the change removed from having to make content that's 5th edition compatible, and now I can make my own game system, this now is the opportunity to, well, how could this be done? Do death saving throws have to work this way? Do we have to use spell slots, people? Come on. The answer is no, you use mana points. But those are the questions I could shake up and ask myself, and I've came up with a very unique rule set. But those are the type of questions I'd ask. Is this the best way to do it, or is there a better way? But that's for you to decide if any of these rules kind of spark your interest. You're like, ooh, that interesting. So first I'm going to break down the 3 big core rules that I think will get a big picture of what DC20 is all about, and then I'm going to rattle off a bunch of different little ones that kind of get you a big picture of the whole thing. And once all that's said and done, if you are interested in the slightest little bit, there's a link down in the description to the Kickstarter that's eventually going to launch in the middle of next year. There's going to be a Kickstarter for the full game and all that kind of stuff. The big release is going to be huge. And if you're interested a little bit, make sure to click that, follow that, and you can stay tuned for that. And if you're a little bit more interested than that, there's also a link down in the description to the alpha of this game. I just released the 0.5 alpha, and I'll keep releasing versions of the alpha. If you do purchase the alpha, you get all future updates of the alpha in this early release stage. And always, if you want to know more, I have a ton of other videos, and I do live streams every single Tuesday on DC20. Come and hang out. So now let's get into the 3 big things. First of all is action points. And coming from a perspective of a D&D player, here's how action points work. I want you to think of a turn in Dungeons and Dragons. You have an action, which is where pretty much the entire turn comes from. Maybe a bonus action, maybe a reaction, and then 30 feet of movement. Now, if you've played D&D before, that sounds fine and you understand that, but explaining that to a new player is not the smoothest of a bonus action, and sometimes you can or cannot use it, and then there's always this really clunky thing at the end of a player's turn where you're like, oh, do you want to do anything as a bonus act? I hate that. And you will see that now more, now that I've said it, you'll see it happen more often. Because in DC20, there's only one type of action economy, and it comes in the form of action points. You have 4 action points. What can you do with those action points? You can attack, you can help your allies, you can move around, you can do a bunch of stuff, and it costs action points. That's it. If you want to run across the battlefield, move, sure. If you want to stand still in the same spot and attack, sure. Time out, wait a second, you've reached the first cool balancing thing in DC20. It would be dumb and broken, and everybody's turns would just be attack, like we see all the time in another game that we're familiar with. So in DC20, how this is combated is whenever you do the same action, whether it be a grapple, help action, attacking, whatever you're doing, hiding, who cares? Whenever you repeat the same action over and over again, you gain stacking disadvantage. So the first attack is a normal attack. The second attack would be at disadvantage. And then the third attack would be at double disadvantage. Yes, that's right. You would roll 3 d20s and take the lowest. And that means, yes, if you made a 4th attack on the the same turn, you would roll 4 d20s and take the lowest. And earlier when I said the game was pretty intuitive, this is kind of what I'm talking about. You gain advantages and disadvantages, keep stacking. If I have multiple things that give me advantage, I roll multiple d20s. Multiple disadvantages yield multiple d20s. You get the idea. So turns are going to be a bit more dynamic and you can change things around. I'm going to go over here and help my ally because the help action actually is useful. Shoving, throwing, grappling, dodging, disengaging, all these things costing 1 action point, maybe 2 action points, and all these other things. It gives you some flexible and freedom to be able to really sculpt your turn. In all the play testing we've been doing, somebody said this very, very nice. In D&D, when you try and min-max your turn, you try and do big number. That's how you optimize the turn, is you just do the most damage possible in one thing. But in DC20, yeah, sure, you can optimize and do a bunch of damage if you want, but to really optimize in DC20, you are creating and being creative with your turn and how you use your action points to get the most and squeeze the most out of each of those action points. And a lot of times that involves the other people at the table that you're playing with. But another thing you can do with these action points, and another thing in DC20, has a lot of symmetry and mirrors. And if you have something on this side that's bad, you got something on this side that's good. So what I'm talking about is, yes, you have stacking disadvantage that happens if you do repeated things. But at any time, you can spend one of your 4 action points to give yourself advantage on something. And that might sound crazy and broken and oh my gosh, what that, oh my god. But keep in mind, your entire turn is 4 action points. So if there's a goblin over there and it's about to run away and you ring the gong and alert the entire camp of your presence, you gotta get over there. I'm gonna spend an action point to run over to that goblin. I'm gonna spend an action point to grapple that goblin. But man, this one grapple check is really important. And if I fail this grapple check, I could grapple again, but it'd be a disadvantage. So, man, this is so important. I'm going to spend another action point on this grapple to give myself advantage. And what if I'm going to do it again? So your entire turn for your team, you need to do this in this moment, is to run over to that goblin and grapple it and give yourself advantage and another advantage. You're rolling 3 d20s, take the highest, let's go. This rule is one of my favorite rules because it lets you really pour your action economy into what you want to do, whether it be for roleplay purposes, trying to save a key NPC that means everything to you, or for tactical purposes, like I just said with the goblin. And if you want to have a very generic D&D turn, you could very easily spend 1 action point to move into combat. You could spend another action point to make 1 attack, 1 regular normal attack, and your second attack would be at disadvantage. But you could spend this last little point to give yourself advantage to cancel it out and make another attack. So if you want to have a basic turn, you can, but the 4 action point system really opens things up. And speaking of opening things up, those 4 action points, I never said this, but reactions in DC20 is not a single one reaction that you have, and if you use it or don't use it, you either waste it or not, or whatever, right? And that's how Pathfinder and D&D work. You have 1 reaction. In DC20, no, you have 4 action points, and you have things that your character, whether given to you by your class, your ancestry, or whatever you might have opportunities to spend action points not on your turn as a reaction. So if you're a martial class with a shield, you want to protect your ally that's next to you, you can spend an action point whenever they get attacked by an enemy in their space to reach over and try and help them out. Somebody's attacking you and you want to try and do a little move around them, you can spend an action point to try and move away. So it's not just opportunity attacks. But keep in mind, if you have these action points, you have 4 action points, it's not your turn yet. You defend an ally, you make an opportunity attack. Cool. When your turn comes back up, you now only have 2 action points. Because you already spent these 2 action points, you only have 2 left. Now your turn only is this, but that's fine because you already spread out your turn across the entire round. You chose to spend 2 points in times where you really wanted to. Now you only have 2 points left. Your turn goes, boom, boom, 2 points. And as soon as you've spent all of your points and as soon as your turn is over, you gain all your points back. And this mechanic alone keeps players more engaged at the table to be able to interact with each other and help each other and do things that their character can do as a reaction, instead of just clocking out after your turn's over because it's going to be another 8 minutes before you can do anything. So there's the first big one, and this second one having to do with damage is a bit of a hot take because of how damage works in DC20. After hundreds of playtests, I really do think that this is the better way to go for it. And I know some people are going to freak out when I say this if you don't know already, but you do not roll for damage in DC20. Damage is still dynamic and changes all over the place, and you still can do a whole bunch of stuff to increase it or decrease it or whatever. Here's how damage works. Your weapon, your spell, your whatever you use to deal damage with has a base damage to it. So let's just use a simple short sword, for example, has a base damage of 2. So if you hit with this short sword, you deal 2 damage. That's it. Now, if that's all you were and you're just a regular castle guard or whatever, that's all you do is deal 2 damage. But here's the interesting part. In D&D, if you roll a 27 to hit, a 30 to hit. Who cares? Because you hit. And if their armor class was a 10, then you hit them just the same if you roll a 27 or whatever. It doesn't matter. That's always felt real bad. And then you roll low on the dice, and then with critical hits, we've all been there. You roll really low on that and it doesn't feel like a crit anymore. In DC20, every 5 that you beat the target's defense by, you deal an extra 1 point of damage. So yes, you might be swinging a 2 damage short sword, but if you rolled a 27 to hit somehow, oh my gosh. And if their defense was a 15, that means you hit a 15, and then 20 would be another point of damage, 25 would be another point of damage, and you just dealt 2 more points of damage. That's double damage. You just dealt 2 more points of damage for 4 total, which is double what you would have done. And if you get a critical hit, it adds +2 on top of that. So if you roll high, it's actually exciting and matters. And if you get a natural 20, it's even more exciting. One of the most exciting moments in a playtest is whenever Duke from One Shot Questers was sitting right next to me. He rolls a 17 on the dice, jumps up and freaks out. The whole table loses their mind over a 17, which would never happen in D&D, because if you did roll a 17, yeah, sure, you know you hit, but that's not even exciting in D&D. You've hit, you still have to go through the phase of rolling for damage, because then you got to go get your dice and you grab them and you grab your D12, you roll it, you get a 1 plus your modifiers. Okay, but in DC20, you know it's going to be exciting because you know you beat that by at least 5, 10, 15, maybe more. Who knows? More bonus damage. And maybe your character has specific extra things that you can do. Maybe you're a rogue and you deal extra damage to targets with conditions on them. Maybe you're a barbarian and while raging, you deal more damage. Maybe you're a paladin and can imbue your weapon and deal extra damage there too. So the damage in DC20 still is dynamic. You don't just deal 2 damage every single turn. The 2 huge pieces of feedback I've gotten from this is when people come to the table and play with an open mind and they're, all right, here we go, and they're done. At the end, so many people have said, you know, I really thought I would miss rolling for damage, and I thought that was a key part of the fun of the game. But it's not, because that other piece of feedback is think about how long it takes at the table. And I might be ruining some things here for your D&D games whenever this happens, because it happens maybe once a session, is somebody gets a really big hit, whether it's a paladin or a rogue or whatever's going on, and they have to go through that phase of collecting all those dice, which instantly disengages everyone at the table, because everyone at the table doesn't know how your mechanics work. So everyone at the table now, you have to go through that phase of like, oh, I hit, okay, here we go. And they have to go collect all the dice. And once they've collected all the dice, then they roll all the dice. Phase 2, rolling the dice. And then they have to now count up all the dice, and nobody else at the table can see the dice and they can't really help unless they're like up over, looking at your dice. And then now you're adding up and doing the math in your head. Oh, it's so boring for everybody else. And then they finally come up with a number, right? And then they can say that number. Ooh. In DC20, that never happens, because you say a big number. Everyone at the table understands. Oh, you've just said a big number. We're all on the same page. Everybody feels the excitement. No one's lost and confused as to the mechanics of your character. And then you now have a base damage of this, and you add, oh, you beat the armor class by 10. That's 2 more bonus damage. So that's 2 for your sword, plus 2 for the bonus damage. That's 4 damage. Oh my God, you divine smited? That's 2 more damage. That's 6 damage. Oh, and you were wielding an axe and the target was bleeding, which is another bonus damage. Oh my God, 7 points of damage. And everyone just experienced the whole thing, understanding everything happened along the way, not had to wait for you to collect some dice and roll some dice to get the average of whatever all the numbers are. Ugh. It's just more efficient and keeps everybody on the same page and keeps the game moving and everyone's together. And yes, also I let a little mini rule slip there. Every weapon in DC20 has different passive mechanics to it. So certain weapons work better against certain types of creatures. And each weapon, which is only for martials, by the way, not spellcasters. Marshals have active abilities they can use with certain weapon types and passive effects and all that kind of stuff. So what weapon you wield matters. And for the third big rule is it has to do with character creation. And then I'm going to go through a quick rapid fire of a bunch of different rules that you might be interested in, is the prime modifier in DC20. In DC20, there are only 4 attributes. Might, which is basically like strength and constitution in one. How strong of a character are you? Then you also have agility, which is how nimble and agile and quick and speedy you are, right? It does have a little bit more to do with speed there too, to balance out the physical 2 stats you have. And that's also a very mirrored part of the game, is might and agility. That's the physicality of your character. And the other two are intelligence, which is no longer shared with wisdom and separated nope, it's just intelligence and charisma. Intelligence, how smart you are overall, how your knowledge of everything, and charisma, your force of will, personality with others. And those two represent your mind. But back to this prime modifier. What is a prime modifier? You have 4 attributes, which just have a single number in it, by the way, which is the plus modifier you have. Very simple, like I referenced before. Also intuitive. Your prime modifier is whichever of those is the highest. I don't care which one it is, it's whichever of those is the highest. So at level 1, the highest attribute you could possibly have is a 3. So let's say your 3 is in might. Let's say it's in intelligence. I don't care where it's at. Your highest attribute is your prime modifier. This number represents how good you are as an adventurer, how experienced you are overall as an adventurer out in the battlefields. So if you're a fighter and you swing a sword, you use your prime modifier to make that swing with your sword. It's not, it's based on might, or it's based on agility, it's based on it doesn't matter. However you're representing your fighter, you are a good fighter. Let's say you have a 3 in intelligence, and intelligence is your main stat as a fighter. Sure, you are an intelligent mastermind of the battlefield. Let's say you chose might and you want to put everything you got into your sword swings. It doesn't matter. However you want to be able to spread your points around, this really opens up character creation. Instead of being like, I am a paladin, I have to have strength to be able to swing my 2-hander, I have to have constitution, I have to have all these different stats that they put you in these boxes. In DC20, it's a lot more open than that. Yes, each of the 4 attributes have very important things that they each provide that people are going to want, people are going to be interested in. Now, yes, all of the 4 attributes do have their own special things, and the more points you put into them, the better you are at those things. But when it comes to the most basic fundamentals of your class, swinging your sword, casting spells, it relies on the prime modifier. So if you want to create a quick agility-based bard, you can do that. If you want to create a smart intelligence-based fighter, you can do that. You might have to sacrifice in other ways because whatever governs those 4 attributes might be a little bit lower. You might be worse at grapples if you don't have a very good might score. But overall, the character creation system has been so awesome to see all the different characters that people can now make, and much less how the class system works. I'm going to do another video next week about how the multi-classing works, because I'll say a little bit here. In general, you have one class that you are, and you are that class. You keep getting all the stuff you have, but you are given talents at regular intervals that you can go steal stuff from other classes instead of stopping the progress like we have to do in other games where you can't progress in your class anymore and you can only get other classes' first level features. In DC20, you're going to keep going and progressing your class, and you're going to have opportunities to go steal interesting, cool stuff from other classes if you want to, or spend those talents within your own class and get other stuff within there. And that's not even talking about the ancestry system, which I just did a video on a few weeks ago on how you can customize your ancestry. Every single ancestry has a default amount of traits that you get for being that ancestry, but you can swap them out for other ones. You can combine ancestries in other ways to create really, really interesting characters. And now for the turbo flyby, I have a bunch of different other rules that might be interested in. Some of these I've done videos on, and if I haven't done videos on them yet, you can guarantee I'll be doing them in the future. Spellcasters have mana points instead of stupid spell slots. You have an amount of mana to be able to cast spells with, and whenever you cast a spell, not only can you cast that spell, but you can choose to spend more mana to enhance that spell. All spells, including cantrips, have spell enhancements that you can choose to pour more mana into to increase its range, increase its radius, add the burning condition. So yeah, you could create a fireball that has a super long range, and you could pump more mana into it and add the burning condition to anyone who gets hit by it. Or you could have something super simple like the light cantrip that essentially does nothing unless you pump a mana point into it, and then there's a flashbang to blind people around you. And at higher levels, you can pump even more mana into these things to even turn something like that light cantrip I just said. If you're a high enough level and you pour enough mana into it, maybe it turns into an absolutely massive flashbang. And on the other side of that system, like I said, this mirroring symmetry situation, spellcasters have mana points and marshals have stamina points. A stamina points is a new energy system for marshals. It is a very small energy system. At level 1, you only have 1 stamina point, and then eventually you have like 5 stamina points. Not a big pool, but what's really interesting about stamina is you start off with full stamina, and then you have certain abilities that spend stamina, and then you have none. And then during the fight, every single martial class has a unique way that they can gain stamina back. Barbarians, if they hit really hard or get hit really hard, card, they recover stamina. Whenever rogues attack targets that have conditions on them, they regain stamina. When a hunter hits their hunter's mark, they regain stamina. And all of these marshals play so differently because they can use and gain stamina in different ways. It's a dynamic energy source in a very small meter, whereas mana points is a very large pool that you spend over time and then it's gone. You have to rest to recover it. But those are also balanced because there's other ways to recover mana too based on your class. And mana and the things that spellcasters can do is so powerful compared to stamina, but it's a really dynamic energy source for marshals to use. Speaking of marshals, every single marshal character has maneuvers that you are able to do. Kind of like in D&D, how the Battlemaster fighter is really cool and fun to play because they have these dice they can use to perform these cool maneuvers. Well, all marshals have maneuvers in DC20 that you're able to do these maneuvers, trip attacks, shove attacks, expose the target to open them up to attack, slow down the target in some way to be able to slow their movement speed. You have these really unique things that you can do to a target instead of just I attack and then I attack again. And earlier we talked about reactions and opportunity attack reactions and all these other things with reactions, but another thing that reactions can do for spellcasters is spellcasters can initiate spell duels. There is no counter spell in this game. No. It's far cooler than that. I've done a video on this, but spell duels are when magic collides midair to stop an opposing spellcaster from casting their magic. So spellcasters can initiate spell duels with another caster. There's rules in place for it, and as far as range, I went over all of that in the video, but magic is wild in this thing, and you can have people combine together. You can also combo spell cast. You and your allies, if you know the same spell and you both know it, you can cast a spell together to cast it in a more powerful version than you could separately. And like I've been saying with all the mirrors and symmetry of DC20, there is a physical defense and a mental defense. There's how physical and shields and armor and what things that can protect you from the fire projectiles and swords and weapons coming at you. And then there's mental defense of your mental protections against magic, psychic damage against yourself, and everything else. So you have two different defenses, which really makes it really interesting for that one player that has a whole bunch of physical defense. Well, what about your mental defense? And Death's Door is actually interesting in this game, is whenever your character ever gets below -3 hit points, which is your prime modifier's value actually. So over time this number increases, but at level 1 it's 3. So if you ever get to -3 hit points in DC20, your character's dead. That's right. You should actually not want to be low in hit points and be able to just be hit and then be okay because now you're on death saving throws and then there's a Death's Door mechanic. When you're at 0 hit points or -1 or -2, you only have one action point. You're fighting for your life. You're bleeding out. You can see it. You can actually role play that moment right before your character goes. And then if they do hit that -3, they're done. So what that means is healing in this game actually matters. Tanking in this game actually matters. Maybe that's a little bit of the MMO background I have, but you have tanking, healing, and damage in this game. You can tank through different maneuvers you can do from protecting your allies within one space of you. You can heal because actually healing matters to keep people up and topped off so that they don't get down to that low threshold. Because yes, if you are at 1 hit point and you get hit for 4 points of damage, you're dead. And another cool side note is spells and casting magic in this game is more unique too, because you always roll a d20 whenever you cast a spell. Healing in D&D, you say I heal and then you roll a dice for how much you healed for, but it's always just the fact that you heal. Or there's sometimes in some spells where you say I cast Dominate Person and then the Dungeon Master rolls a dice and then they say a number and you never did anything. You just said words. You never rolled a dice in a TTRPG. You didn't roll a dice to cast Mind Control or whatever spell it is. You just said words and the Dungeon Master did a save and then nothing happened. In DC20, you're always rolling a dice. So in DC20, if you want to cast Mind Control or Dominate Person or whatever, you're making a spell check versus that person's save. It's a contest. It's just more fun. And the same thing is true for heals. Whenever you heal in DC20, you roll a spell check to roll that heal. And the base heal is 3. But if every 5 you succeed against that DC buy of the spell that you're doing, you can heal for more and more and more. You could get a critical heal and heal for a ton. Healers are actually really cool. Now I could go on, and especially about classes and class design and the unique and new directions that all the classes are going in, ancestries and how all that works. I could go on and on, but if any of this sounds interesting to you at all, I would love for you to check out more. I have tons of other videos you can check out. I have a whole bunch of things coming in the future of future videos. And like I said, if you're even more interested in that, you can check out the Kickstarter, link down in the description. It should be going in the middle of next year is when it should be launching. So stay tuned for that. But if you can't wait any longer and you want to be able to play right now, the alpha is available, is live right now. The support from people purchasing this alpha is how I'm able to even keep making this in the first place, to be able to get to be that Kickstarter. With all the OGL fiasco that has gone on and with all the different things having to do with content creators, I made a big, scary leap to go and to make this game. It's been from patrons who support what I do month after month after month, and from people who back and support the alpha to be able to get this PDF, get early access to it, get your hands on it, play it yourselves, give some feedback, talk with this great community. It's just been absolutely wild, the amount of support that's come from you guys. And the support from other content creators who have been loving up and been interested in DC20, seeing what we're doing here, seeing what these rules are, seeing how fun they are, whether they've played them themselves or just read it. Just listening to some of these rules, I hope that you're like, man, that would be cool. And it just keeps getting better and better. Every single update, the game gets more and more polished. I am taking in so much feedback on a daily basis. I'm releasing more and more. Then more classes are coming out soon. More levels are coming out soon. Everything is coming. And if you're interested at all, there's a ton of different ways, like I've just said, to get into the DC20 action. So until next time, stay creative. Think outside the box. Peace.